They called it High Point, a pale limestone mansion placed above a factory whose chimneys always released a sweet powdery scent into the town. From the valley, the place looked like a real-life chocolate factory. Tidy brick rows, a chocolate plant, neat shade trees, and a park for workers' children. On the hill sat 22 rooms of oak and stained glass where Milton S. Hershey and his wife, Catherine Kitty Sweeney, tried to carve out a private paradise. That paradise collapsed on March 25, 1915. Kitty, fragile and ill, lay in a Philadelphia hotel room and asked for a glass of champagne. Milton hurried into the corridor to fetch it. By the time he returned, she'd stopped breathing. Hershey's own records and local archive records seemed to leave out one small and seemingly ordinary detail. It was about a dropped crystal and a sudden silence that turned a life into a shrine. That quiet moment rewired everything that followed. Milton's beginnings were modest. Born September 13, 1857 in Derry Township, Pennsylvania. He grew up in a family that moved often and scraped to survive. School ended early. An apprenticeship at a printing press and stints behind confectioners' benches taught him trade that others learned only in theory. A crucial technical insight, discovered while he was apprenticed and later refined out west, changed everything. Fresh milk added to caramel recipes made them softer and extended shelf life. It was a small industrial advantage, the kind of detail that turns a regional product into a nationally sold product. The path forward was anything but certain. Milton opened shops that failed, endured humiliating bankruptcies, and followed dead ends. Yet stubbornness and craft turned into commercial success. The Lancaster Caramel Company expanded, exported goods, and in the spring of 1900, Milton sold it for a sum that gave him the capital to gamble on chocolate. That sale, reported at about $1 million at the time, roughly $39 million today, was the economic turning point. With cash in hand, he bought cutting-edge machinery and a plot of land where fresh milk and nearby rail connections promised steady input and broad markets. He built systems for standardizing recipes and mechanizing production so quality could be scaled. High Point rose as both sanctuary and proclamation. Architect C. Emlyn Urban drew a house that favored light and social spaces like a winter garden thick with palms and roses, oak paneling, stained glass, and modern plumbing. All of these comforts felt luxurious in a new industrial town. Construction invoices show roughly $53,000 for the basic build. With furniture and landscaping, the final tally swelled. Urban cited the mansion to overlook the factory and the rail yards. The house and enterprise belonged to the same panorama. But money couldn't cure his Kitty. Shortly after moving into High Point, her health worsened. Tremors, poor coordination, and long days where she could not leave the rooms. Physicians of the time had few remedies. Servants remembered a culture of silence, curtains drawn to limit light. Flowers replaced each morning, and rooms kept silent so a single loud sound wouldn't trigger distress. The big home offered shelter and privacy, but those same walls amplified the loneliness of a marriage robbed of children and wealth. In late 1911, Milton made a modest payment to the White Star Line, a record that shows he and Kitty had reserved passage for an ocean voyage. Business timing and Kitty's illness forced them to change plans. 3 days later, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank. Surviving that narrow miss felt to Milton like a premonition, a sense that he'd been spared for a purpose larger than profit. The memory of that near escape sharpened his sense of obligation, and that feeling showed up in the legal structures that he later chose. That obligation took institutional form. Milton and Kitty had already signed a deed establishing the Hershey Industrial School, designed as a home and practical school for boys with few resources. After Kitty's death, Milton moved resolutely. In November 1918, he transferred the bulk of his company's stock and assets to a trust for the school, an act contemporaries marked as the foundation of a philanthropic enterprise that linked business to education. Milton's vision extended beyond philanthropy into paternal design. He built comfortable homes for his managers, parks for workers, and ran programs for children. The Hershey community was organized. so that the factory's success translated into stable housing, education, and recreation for employees and their families. In the mansion, Milton preserved Kitty's rooms exactly as they were. Dresses hung, perfume bottles in their places, the bed made. Publicly, he poured resources into civic life, a park for recreation, a theater and libraries for culture, housing and schools for workers. He resisted extravagant private living and fashioned the company into a long-term engine of social investment. Milton lived long enough to watch the institutions breathe. He died on October 13, 1945, at age 88, with a photograph of Kitty at his bedside. He had no children. His gift and trust structure created a pathway that kept the company tethered to the school's mission. In recent decades, the Milton Hershey School Trust has grown into a major philanthropic actor with assets in the multi-billions, showing that one man's grief shaped an organization that endured beyond his timeline. High Point taught different lessons to different observers. To some, it was the ultimate proof that private sorrow could be transformed into public good. The mansion's oak and stained glass became features in a larger silver project. To others, it read as a company town where a single visionary set the terms of life, work, and education for thousands. And still, the mansion retained its human traces. The faint ring on the dining room table where a glass of champagne once sat. The scent of roses in the winter garden where gardeners replaced blooms daily. Visitors who saw the preserved rooms talk about feeling watched, not by ghosts exactly, but by decisions, choices Milton made in grief that outlived him. There's also the spectacle of near misses and survivals. The Titanic episode became family lore, a small canceled trip, a return check, and avoidance that later read like destiny. Those near-certain tragedies framed Milton's subsequent acts of charity. He knew if fate had spared him, then he believed he owed the world something larger than a factory or a fortune. But sorrow didn't leave the house undefended. High Point also witnessed human smallness. The occasional scandal when managers or heirs misstepped, whispers about extravagances during hard economic seasons, and ongoing debates over how much control a trust should have. The mansion wasn't immune to the messy entropies of time. Lath cracked, guilt flaked, and staff rotated. Preservation required work and arguments. It was a debate between memory and practicality in every old house court. When you stand on the High Point's lawn today, you see stone on a hill and the long sweep of the factory below. You see chimneys that once inhaled milk and chocolate-scented steam and exhaled the daily miracle of candy. You see an estate that might be read as a testament, depending on your vantage point. There's no single moral. Instead, the mansion offers a story about how grief, industry, and intention can combine into institutions that shape lives across generations. That's the shocking part. The mansion is both a private reliquary and a public instrument. It began as the domestic center for a man who loved one woman, lost her, and refused to let loss remain private. He enshrined his grief and then turned his wealth into a mechanism that would fund education and opportunity for children who otherwise had none. The Chocolate King's Mansion, High Point, stands as a place of contradiction, where sweetness meets austerity, and where sorrow was converted into social architecture. Today, preservation debates continue. Conservators quarrel about restoration methods, trustees debate access, and visitors bring fresh eyes to the rooms. Tours reveal both fragile artifacts and the administrative papers that document how grief was converted into governance. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.